who don't know me. I'm a former United States Marine Corps intelligence officer. I participated in Operation Desert Storm and served as the Chief Weapons Inspector for the United Nations in Iraq. My main interests are international relations and armed conflicts in different parts of the world. I am convinced that we all should know a little more about a person who, to the applause of those I call the global elite, is ready to fight to the last Ukrainian, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. President, there have been numerous publications about you, but everything seems to disappear from the web. Your image is carefully managed and not without reason. You immediately understood why I named my film Agent Zelensky, didn't you? Let's begin.
You have had many film roles. Which one is your favorite? I would say that Servant of the People is probably my favorite.
The year is 2015. It's the premiere of the first season of Servant of the People series. According to the credits, the producer was Volodymyr Zelensky. In reality, he wasn't producing it by himself. Instead, his promotion had begun. No wonder such a role became one of his favorites. Zelensky portrayed the character Vasily Goluborodko, a school history teacher who becomes the president of Ukraine.
I want to compare that situation to situation where, for example, you come into the plane, you boarding, and you take in your seat, and now you see that man who look like a pilot, who dressed like a pilot, who speak like a pilot, greeting passengers, but who is not a pilot at all, who is an actor, who played a pilot in response for your life.
Before the presidential elections, no one had seen a single press conference from the showman. Only interviews and videos were broadcast. Well, you understand, it makes it possible to retake or rewrite a dumb answer. Almost all statements Zelensky made were on behalf of the cinematic president, Goluborodko.
To all the people who want to quarrel with us, to divide our country, to separate us by color, by language, and so on, to all of you, I can't speak for myself, as I am a person of culture, so let one of the characters familiar to everyone, Vasily Goluborodko, say it. And all the rest of you, villains, go to hell. In all this story, the Ukrainian population became the object of manipulation. The creation of the TV series Servant of the People, in which he was prepared for his role, marked the beginning of imposing an image on people that he could be a potential head of state. And after that, he ran for elections. It was an absolutely skillful manipulation.
Now watch the hands. The final third season of Servant of the People was released just 4 days before the first round of the presidential election. Vasily Goluborodko emerged victorious, became the head of the country, and transformed it into a powerful and prosperous nation. Damn. This is the best pre-election campaign in the history of mankind. And it worked. In real life, on the 21st of April, Volodymyr Zelensky defeated Petro Poroshenko with over 70%, 23% of the votes. Clearly, such a scenario was not created in Ukraine, nor by Ukraine. Here, our compatriots are ahead of the entire planet.
The role of Hollywood in Washington, D.C., it is, first of all, it's not the decision makers, but this is creators of idea, concepts. So if the idea flying well with the audience, you can repeat that idea in real life, in real politics, and it's gonna play. So this is similarity in that Servant of People TV series and a film that Chris Rock produced and directed, Head of State, when it was a black president who come from a Democratic Party and served the people.
And if this works, why not replicate the scheme in a country close to Russia? And why not elect someone there based on the same principle? Someone who is unconditionally following orders.
That is a carefully prepared operation by one of the intelligence services, or all of the intelligence services in the United States and in NATO, to make sure that their guy is in charge and will do what they tell him to do, rather than somebody who has ideas of his own.
A carefully prepared operation by one of the intelligence agencies. What a revelation. Michael, thank you for this. It allows us to look at the following facts with an understanding of who is behind them. Let's figure out how and with whose help Washington started pushing actor and comedian Zelensky.
Ihor Valerievich Kolomoisky. Do we have any connection? Yes, of course. Well, we have business relations. We are TV partners. We all work for these. How many? 5 or 6 families.
5 or 6 families. Was I rewatching The Godfather just now? As if Zelensky is talking about the mafia. And it seems to be true. Igor Kolomoisky is a billionaire and an oligarch. Currently, he is under investigation by a U.S. federal court for money laundering. Back then, he was a figure of importance, even across the ocean.
In 2014, Kolomoisky becomes the uncrowned king of Ukraine. Not only the governor, not only the ruler of Ukernafta, and head of the bank that is much stronger than any state bank. He became the leading oligarch.
8 years ago, why was it decided to make Kolomoisky the key player in the operation to bring Zelensky to power? In 2015, Petro Poroshenko nationalized his main assets, such as the Ukernafta company and later private bank. There is undoubtedly a personal vendetta at play. During the presidential elections, Kolomoisky was happy to criticize Poroshenko on his 1+1 channel, and at the same time to support Zelensky. Is it possible to say that it was Kolomoisky who brought Zelensky to power? Definitely not. Mr. Volodymyr has other puppeteers behind the scenes.
Are you dependent on Ihor Valerievich? And could it mean that after your victory in the presidential elections, Kolomoisky will rule Ukraine? I am a completely independent person. No offense, but a man who could control me hasn't yet been born.
If Zelensky was really on that rope of Kolomoisky, I predict the private bank will be run by Kolomoisky again, but it's not happened. So that means he has no obligation to do more. He just not putting him in a jail, and that's enough for Kolomoisky to be very thankful for him. After that, he will start playing the card as his masters of puppet want.
By the time Zelensky came to power, these puppeteers had already provided him with a financial cushion. It's doubtful that anyone remembered his earnings from the movies.
Regarding Zelensky and his inner circle, it is also important to take into account all the manipulations and financial frauds that characterize this team. Firstly, Zelensky concealed some parts of his stakes in companies before the presidential elections. And then, in particular, his mentor Kolomoisky used them for money laundering.
Empty words? By no means. As I mentioned, we will operate with facts. In the fall of 2021, investigative journalists published the so-called Pandora Papers. Nearly 12 million confidential documents from financial companies in different countries were revealed, including offshore data on 35 world leaders. Volodymyr Zelensky and his partners from the Cartel 95 studio were among them. The Ukrainian president indeed owned offshore companies, including a stake in Maltex Multi-Capital Corporation. Zelensky modestly omitted this information in his declaration. But most importantly, in 2012 to 2016, Kolomoisky transferred $41 million to Zelensky's offshore company.
He could be jailed in a normal country for such an offense.
But this is Ukraine, and Zelensky is its president. And according to the offshore documents, he is a very wealthy president.
Are you planning to use the state residences? Guys, let some kids live in these residences. Like some vacation camps for people who really need it.
In my opinion, it sounds cute, especially when you don't know about the residency he owns. Ready to find out? Let's go. Firstly, a villa in Miami for himself, worth $34 million. I've been to Florida and can understand the taste of the president of Ukraine. Secondly, a house in Israel for his parents on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. It's worth $8 million. Europe, Zelensky prefers Italy. Tuscany, the best wines. By the way, one of the most expensive resorts in the country, Forte del Mare. Houses here are worth their weight in gold. In 2017, together with his wife, he bought a villa 600 meters from the sea. According to the declaration, it was worth about $3.8 million at that time. Is that all? Not at all. From the south, we moved north. Not to Siberia, of course, but to London. Old Center, legendary Baker Street, opposite the Sherlock Holmes Museum. There's another Zelensky residence, an apartment worth $3 million. Why? Probably to stay while visiting his owners with a report. More on that later. Apparently, the real estate was purchased through the company of his business partner, Sergei Sheffer. That's why he's called Zelensky's personal wallet in Ukraine. I almost forgot about real estate. Georgia, not the state, the country. A new multi-story apart hotel in the city of Batumi. You might ask, Batumi? What is that? Well, take a look. It's also a seaside resort. Apartments are under renovation, but an expensive finish, panoramic windows, and views in the city and the mountains. Hint, that it was built for well-to-do people. At least 5 apartments here belong to Zelensky. Finally, the settlement of Levadia, an elite residential complex, Emperor.
Здесь открывается шикарный вид на
Look,
дом.
a magnificent view of Zelensky's house opens up.
Вот он.
Here it is, a seashore over there.
Берег.
Lions, wide staircases, and columns. On the roof, there's a luxurious terrace, a pool, and a wonderful sea view. But guys, it's Crimea, which is currently under Russian control. Zelensky made a mistake here, and the Russians will surely figure out how to use it to their advantage. Zelensky's penthouse was purchased here in 2013, right before the so-called Crimean Spring. Nowadays, such a property could be worth about $1 million. However, a different amount is stated in his declaration. 1,384,000 hryvnias, or about $164,000. Well, we don't even need to mention the real estate in Kyiv or the official residence of the head of the republic in Koncha-Zaspa. Even without those, it's quite a collection of villas, houses, and apartments. However, the Ukrainian president is in no rush to give them to children, at least not to other people's children. Unfortunately, we have to admit the obvious. Volodymyr Zelensky has always been stingy and greedy.
When I saw this person running between tables and collecting tips, roughly speaking, making compliments with an ugly smile, right from that moment, he disgusted me. He was performing at events where the payment had already been made in advance. His group was paid in cash, and still, he was running around collecting money from the tables. It showed what he had initially been like.
He was visiting Hollywood here in Los Angeles. He privately requested for meeting with and some kind of arrangements to meet and have a dinner with the famous Hollywood stars like Leo DiCaprio or others. In private, not through the protocol. As a president, already sitting president who want to private dinner with a great star. This is telling a lot about his greed, about his ego.
Actors are forgiven for having villas worldwide and making big money. That's their personal business. But there are questions for a president who presents himself as a man of the people and a fighter against corruption while hiding a dirty history of money laundering.
These mythical Ukrainian roads are only built and repaired in someone's vivid imagination.
The most ambitious project of the Ukrainian president turned out to be the biggest, with a capital B, embezzlement. In the spring of 2020, Zelensky promised to build and repair 6,500 kilometers of roads in Ukraine in a couple of years. In autumn, the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine discovered that 129 billion hryvnias went to the big construction project, though only 127 billion were allocated from the country's budget. At first I thought maybe Zelensky wanted to build roads not only in his country, but maybe also in Poland. Nope. Just 4,000 kilometer of roads cost 120 billion hryvnias. By comparison, in 2018, only 40 billion were spent on 3,800 kilometers of roads. So the cost per kilometer tripled. Meanwhile, the same companies won a significant part of the tenders. There was a lack of funds, but roads are sacred. That's why 1 billion hryvnias from the COVID-19 fund were allocated to construction, while thousands of Ukrainians were dying from the virus. Moreover, 62 billion hryvnias allocated for cancer treatment were also spent. Meanwhile, Ukraine ranked second in Europe in terms of oncological diseases.
I thought that the systemic corruption built by Poroshenko in Ukraine could not get any worse, but Zelensky surpassed him. There are no standards, no principles at all.
In 2015, The Guardian named Ukraine the most corrupt country in Europe. You might say, that was before Zelensky. What about 2023? Well, nothing has changed. Zelensky continues to steal and deceive. Do you remember his words?
Наше найперше завдання
Our first task is a ceasefire in Donbass.
на Донбасі. Можу запевнити.
I assure you, I'll do whatever it takes for our heroes to no longer die.
Я готовий на все.
I haven't heard a word about the civilians of Donbass, and I'm sure neither of you. Zelensky was speaking about the militants of the so-called anti-terrorist operation. At that time, eastern Ukraine had been under shelling for 5 years, and that's why the words about peace were so eagerly awaited. I would like to remind you that in 2014, there was a coup d'etat called Maidan. Did it happen on its own, without anyone's help? I agree with you. There is no doubt. The opposition seized power with the support of various radical right-wing movements. The eastern and southern regions of the country stood against the new illegal government, but the resistance was brutally suppressed. On May 2nd, 2014, Ukrainian nationalists burned 48 people alive in the trade union's house in Odessa. At that time, Zelensky, a popular actor in Ukraine and Russia, had zero reaction. But the Odessa events became a point of no return for the country. Residents of Donbass decided to separate from Ukraine. In response, Kyiv declared its citizens as terrorists and launched an army against them. Over time, the civil war escalated into an armed conflict with Russia. However, all of this was preceded by extensive preparation and support from the United States and Western countries.
The United States has invested some $5 billion in Ukraine since 1991, when it became an independent state again after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that money has been spent on supporting the aspirations of the Ukrainian people to have a strong democratic government that represents their interests.
As a result, destroyed cities, chaos, and the loss of life on both sides of the conflict. In our country, it's usual to blame everything on Russia. But what did President Volodymyr Zelensky do himself to prevent this horror? Firstly, he could have implemented the Minsk agreements. In September 2014, Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and France signed them. One of the critical conditions for peace was granting special status to Donbass. December 2019, a joint conference following the Normandy format meeting.
Необходимо, конечно, продлить.
It is necessary, of course, to extend the agreement term on the special status of certain regions of Donbass, and ultimately make this norm permanent.
Here comes the moment for Zelensky to repay debt, for wealth, for coming to power. Just look at it. He doesn't even hide his smirk during the speech of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Apparently, he already knew that the Minsk agreements were just a screen, covering the preparations for a full-scale war between Ukraine and Russia. As for Russia and Donbass, they were deceived from the very beginning. Furthermore, both Zelensky and Petro Poroshenko were eager to join not only the European Union, but also NATO. And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has been promising to accept Ukraine for many years. Of course, this irritates and angers Russia. Who wants to have a constant military threat at their doorstep? As an American, I wouldn't be happy either. For example, with Chinese military bases on the Mexican border. But Russia is different. Let's turn Ukraine against it, arm it to the teeth, and sit it into battle. U.S. foreign policy expert James Jatras accurately assesses what is happening.
Our policy, however, is to weaken and destroy Russia. Now, for that purpose, yes, we are interested in Ukraine. Ukraine is a club we can beat the Russians with. It has nothing to do with Ukraine, nothing to do with Ukrainians who are simply expendable people as far as these governments are concerned.
But it seems like the authorities of Ukraine don't really care. Besides, President Zelensky and his team are adding fuel to the fire.
I am initiating consultations in the framework of the Budapest Memorandum. If they aren't held again, or their results don't guarantee security for our country, Ukraine will have every right to believe that the Budapest Memorandum is not working, and all the package decisions of 1994 are being questioned.
The Budapest Memorandum is an agreement under which Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees. In 1994, it was signed by Russia, the United States, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. Ukraine had to agree because it didn't have the money to maintain a nuclear arsenal. And recent history has shown that the world is very lucky it turned out that way.
Even if we couldn't maintain them, we could reduce the nuclear capabilities instead, and we could use it to blackmail the entire world, and they would give us money for the maintenance.
Imagine that, a nuclear power that blackmails the whole world, demanding money. Would you like to have such a neighbor? I'm sure you wouldn't. No one would. The president of Ukraine practically declares his desire to regain nuclear weapons, and Russia initiates a special military operation. To bring it to this point, Ukraine had to be made an enemy of Russia, or anti-Russian.
The idea was to create a Nazi Ukraine, because only a Nazi Ukraine could fight against Russia. Only the Nazis. Any other type would never fight against Russia. So they needed to build a Nazi Ukraine.
After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine started saturating itself with nationalism. Yushchenko became the first Ukrainian president made by the West. Actually, not just a president. Even his personal life was America's achievement. I have to give credit to our system. We know what an excellent work is. Take a look in the 90s. A high-ranking employee of the U.S. State Department, Catherine Chumachenko, a native of Chicago and the daughter of Ukrainian immigrants, came to Kyiv for work. As a child, like many other children in the diaspora, she went through the scout camp Plast. I'll tell you more about that later. Then she became a member of the neo-Nazi organization, National Alliance.
Initially, Yekaterina Chumachenko sought a husband among the executives who could really lead Ukraine. So Chumachenko asked Yushchenko's assistant, Rybachuk, to put her near Yushchenko on a plane heading from Kiev to Washington. 9 hours after the flight, he was absolutely in love, left his 2 children and wife, and went to Chumachenko as a banker.
At that moment, the flywheel started spinning with new force. Zelensky, under careful dictation, completes the bloody plan. Yushchenko was the first to make nationalism and Russophobia the ideology of Ukraine at the state level. In 2006, he rehabilitated the nationalist Ukrainian organization OUN-UPA, which executed Poles and Jews during the Second World War. In 2010, he bestowed the titles of Heroes of Ukraine upon fascist collaborators, Stepan Bandera and Roman Shukovich. He even threatened to expel the Russian Black Sea Fleet from Crimea. Essentially, Yushchenko severed ties with Russia, giving our country a blank check. Perhaps you'll ask me again if my imagination is playing tricks on me.
At the time, one of the offices in the SBU building was allocated to CIA personnel. There were even anecdotal cases when the U.S. ambassador, together with his entourage, handed out diplomas to the graduates of the SBU Academy. And there were the representatives of American intelligence agencies.
In 2010, Yushchenko lost the election to Viktor Yanukovych. The new president stripped Bandera and Shukovich of their hero titles and sought to restore relations with Russia. But turning Ukraine into an anti-Russian state was only a matter of time. Let's dig a little deeper. A joint institute of the U.S. and German Ministries of Defense. Previously, they trained intelligence agents there. Since 1993, they've trained political elites and specialists from different countries to promote democracy. And that's the official version.
They were focused on searching for suitable agents. It means how to attract people to an active position, to confrontation. Of course, all security officials and military personnel were recruited through the Marshall Center.
Graduates of the Institute, ministers, ambassadors, parliamentarians, and advisors. 14,000 significant people from 157 countries, including Ukrainians. The program consists of lectures, seminars, internships at major universities in Western Europe and the United States, receptions, and museum visits. But the main thing is career advancement in their homeland. This is what Ukrainian political scientist Andrei Mishin could have obtained. In 1998, he worked at the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and was preparing an important agreement with Russia. It was about military political cooperation.
The West advised us in every possible way to remove this topic. Again, they insisted on the removal of dual citizenship between Russia and Ukraine. And Deputy Minister San Sanich-Chali said that the political advisor to the United States Embassy in Ukraine wanted to meet with me.
Andrei Mishin only held the position of the second secretary. The political advisor was several ranks above him. This was unusual. But the conversation turned out even more bizarre.
It all started with a strange question. Andrei, do you understand that Russia will soon disintegrate? How? He says, well, you see, how they recruit, how they provoke you. There was Chechnya, and there will be another Chechnya, maybe Siberian Republic and Tatarstan. You know, it's like a funnel, the same as how the Soviet Union collapsed. Everyone can be drawn into this funnel. That's why Ukraine should join NATO. We are very interested in the young generation of politicians and security officials who could work with us.
Later, Misha was taken to Moldova, Switzerland, Italy, Georgia, and the United States on behalf of the Marshall Center. They gave lectures on international conflicts and military patriotic education for youth and provided them with analytical literature. In return, they required short reports, for example, on the socio-political situation in Ukraine and the preparation of lectures for American military personnel, special agents, and diplomats. All topics were related to Russia and the former Soviet republics. After the Maidan in 2014, the Marshall Center became a mecca for the highest-ranking Ukrainian officials and military personnel. Here's one of the letters from the Marshall Center, addressed to the chairman of the Security Service of Ukraine, Valentin Nalyvaichenko. It's an invitation to a seminar on the strategic development of Ukraine. Students are Ukrainian ministers and generals, instructors, representatives of intelligence agencies from the United States and the United Kingdom.
I think 100% of high-ranking Ukrainian officials, one way or another, have received training at this center. Essentially, they were training people with one task: to counteract the Russian Federation, now or in the future, solely for that purpose.
One of the seasons of the TV series Servant of the People is dedicated to presidential elections. Candidate Goloborodko hires a professional PR specialist, but later fires him, and along with a team of friends, develops and runs his election campaign. Did presidential candidate Zelensky do the same? Of course not. During the elections, his campaign headquarters secretly worked with the Washington lobbying agency Signal Group Consulting. The task was to arrange meetings between Zelensky, the Trump administration, and members of Congress. Zelensky's headquarters denied this connection, but here you can see the documents. The service agreement and Signal Group's report to the U.S. Department of Justice stated that Zelensky paid them nearly $70,000. Quite affordable for a presidency, isn't it? Perhaps the actors spared money, or maybe they gave him a good discount on their PR services. However, Zelensky was eager to please the U.S. and UK authorities. Therefore, after the elections, the number of foreign PR agencies increased. Please meet Andrew Mack. Since November 2019, he has been an external advisor to Zelensky. He's an American citizen and a descendant of Ukrainian immigrants. The director of the lobbying firm SKD Knickerbocker, Stephen Kruppen, former speechwriter for President Barack Obama, now works for Zelensky. Shai Franklin founded the lobbying firm Your Global Strategy. It builds bridges between Ukrainian government and American mayors. It seems that one of these guys had a hand in quite a terrible idea. We are talking about a glamorous photo shoot amid hostilities. The main character of the photo session is the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, a desperate housewife alongside her brave hero husband. Zelensky, as usual, looks unshaven and stern. His military style complements his wife's luxurious outfits. Take note of how well she wears the $7,900 Louis Vuitton coat. The extras are wearing uniforms from the military brand 5.11 Multicam. The average cost is about $8,000. The very famous and expensive American photographer, Annie Leibovitz, did the photo shoot. In the past, she worked with John Lennon and Demi Moore. Her fee for a single working day is $75,000. It goes without saying, the team of stylists, makeup artists, and journalists surely didn't work for free. Those who have forgotten, during this time, innocent people are suffering and dying. The country is devastated, and heavily reliant on foreign aid. Because of this, the photo session did not sit well with some Ukrainians and foreigners. Some even compared the Zelensky's photo shoot to the pictures of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun. And all of this is part of the payment for Zelensky's hard work as an agent serving America and the British Crown.
У нас була зустріч.
We had a meeting at the MI6 office.
На жаль,
Unfortunately, I can't disclose all the information.
інформація можу говорити.
It's a matter of state affairs.
Autumn 2020. Ukrainian media accidentally, or maybe not, learned about Zelensky's secret meeting with Richard Moore, the head of MI6. Not just anywhere, but at the headquarters of British intelligence service. According to the president, the meeting was about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty.
Oui, là, on a assisté à l'occasion de cette rencontre entre Vladimir
Yes,
Zelensky
the meeting of Volodymyr Zelensky is something new because
quelque chose de très nouveau parce que si on regarde
if we look at World War II, the Cold War, we have never had real meetings between the leader of a country in a state of war and a group of intelligence representatives.
As a Secret Service agent, I'd like to tell you that there are special norms of decency and protocol. When a president of a sovereign country is on a foreign territory, he should meet with his counterpart. The only exception is if the head of intelligence himself comes to Ukraine to meet with Zelensky.
Coming down to the lowest level, to the head of the intelligence agency, is not a simple admission of guilt. At that time, the person becomes an actual professional agent. It is clear. One handler always works with one agent. In the case of Zelensky, the head of MI6, Richard Moore, became his direct handler.
Trust my experience. You can't just make someone work as an agent without a hook or substantial grounds. And if we carefully trace the events leading up to this remarkable meeting, we will find them. In the summer of 2020, British intelligence almost captured the internationally renowned Wagner PMC members. These Wagnerians took Bakhmut, for example, Palmyra in Syria. They significantly interfered in spreading British policy in Africa. It happened that the mercenaries slipped right under the nose of MI6. Whether it's true or not, they say the operation failed due to the office of the President of Ukraine. Somebody called and warned them. Now, no one will figure out if it was a mistake, a calculation, or foolishness. That's why Richard Moore didn't bother investigating. They summoned Zelensky to show him his place and at the same time to discuss the extent of his independence and freedom in Ukraine.
Вони чекають від нас пропозиції.
They expect proposals about independent media from us.
З Україною фінансувати за те,
They are ready to finance them together with Ukraine to provide Ukraine with information that corresponds to the main issue.
головному питанні. Це захисту свободи.
Protection of freedom and human rights, and above all, shield the information that defends our country.
Everyone understands. The MI6 office gave the President of Ukraine a precise directive. The thing is, after the Maidan in 2014, there are quite a lot of Ukrainian opposition media. Obviously, they were preventing the creation of an image of Russia as an enemy to Western countries. It was decided to end the dissenters with Zelensky's hands. And to prevent the president from getting bored and to help him practice English, he was surrounded by British security. This was in the spring of 2022, in the midst of war in Bucha. Look at these scenes. Do you see a patch on the sleeve of one of the guys near Zelensky?
Я думаю, ми навіть з вами не можемо розглядати можливість. Не можемо.
The Ukrainian flag is upside down. A local would have been shot on the spot for this. But this guy is okay. Do you know why? Because he has the right to. He is a foreigner, like everyone else around Zelensky. In fact, judging by their pronunciation, they're British.
As we can see, Zelensky's security team consists of Brits. Quite marvelous, because we have the so-called Ninth Administration, the President's security, with 1,800 professional military guys, special forces, and combat swimmers.
Well, not surprising. Firstly, UK intelligence services most likely helped Zelensky with the theatrical staging in Bucha. Secondly, the British follow every step of their agent, even during the meeting with the Pope. Oh, this episode deserves special attention. It seemed to me like a meeting between a priest and a devil. Judge for yourselves. Zelensky went to the Vatican in a black sweatshirt with the emblem of the UNO, Ukrainian Nationalist Organization. He gave the Pope an icon with a black silhouette instead of Christ. which is outright Satanism according to church canons. He plopped into a chair before the host. For those unaware, this is a gross violation of etiquette. And he didn't pay much attention to Pope Francis's peaceful initiatives. Italians considered that rude. I'm sure this whole comedy was a distraction. The central communication of Zelensky took place not in the Pope's office, but in the next room, without the involvement of Pope Francis, but with the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Holy See, Archbishop Paul Richard Gallagher, a native Brit whose cardinals are conducting powerful propaganda in Ukraine. The Ukrainian president spoke with Gallagher for almost an hour and a half. But the main detail is that the head of MI6, Richard Moore, was also present at the meeting in the Vatican. Maybe this fact explains the record-breaking motorcade of the leader of independent Ukraine, over 20 cars.
To be sure that that guy do not make a trick to suddenly make a peace with Vladimir Putin, they take hostages his kids and a wife in Great Britain. This is another layer of security for masters of puppets.
How is it possible to reprogram the whole country and its people against Russia? How is Ukraine paying back now? I'll tell you more in the next episode.